Welcome to the Time Management Podcast with me, your host, Abigail Barnes. I'm a productivity coach, global speaker, time management author, and award-winning entrepreneur on a mission to share the 888 formula with the world and to remind you that it's your time. Leave it to me to bring you new time management tips, tricks, tools, and strategies, to introduce you to guests, research, and case studies from around the world, and to give you a simple 5-step process you can follow to uplevel your productivity, achieve your goals, and create a life that exceeds your wildest dreams. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Welcome to the show. Today, I am so excited to be joined by a special guest, the most amazing Ruth Penfold. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me, my darling. I'm thrilled to be here.
Let's dive straight in. Who is Ruth Penfold in a nutshell?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it, gang? Ruth Penfold is a woman who is doing her very best to live as every part of who she is in order that I can encourage and inspire other women to do the same.
Amazing. And who was Ruth before she was this version of herself today?
Oh, that's another great question. Ruth has always had this big, beautiful heart. She's just applied it in the wrong way, in the wrong energy, in the wrong situations at times. So she was a little lost. She didn't know who she was. And so she set about trying to map that out in the world by trying to give more and be more to the humans around her, more than she should have.
And talk us through your relationship with time over the years, your experience of time in your career, your experience of time as a child. What stands out the most for you?
When I think about time, for me, I think about my relationship to being able to structure my world in a way where I truly thrive. Because there was a time where I felt like time was limitless and I didn't really think about time. And I think that's one of the gifts that you have when you're younger, right? You're like, it just is, right? You're not questioning it. You're just in your life. And then happily, when I was about 30, which is about 15 years ago, I was shaken violently awake by an experience. And through that experience and realizing that I'd sort of lost myself fully, I then was able to deliberately construct my life and my time in a way where I really got to thrive. And that does involve quite a lot of structure. So, but for me, before order, there was chaos, I would say. I just didn't know that it was chaos when I was in the chaos.
And what hats have you worn over the years, career-wise?
I started out in recruitment in my first gig. And then I was in recruitment for about 13, 14 years. And I went in-house with Shazam, the consumer app. And then I was sort of leading recruitment teams there. That was my first. In fact, it wasn't. I was leading teams really from about the second year of my career, to be honest, in recruitment companies and then beyond. And then I became a chief people officer, VP people, chief people officer, and I was heading up those areas. And then I pivoted and became an executive coach, leadership coach. What I have missed, though, is nestled in the middle of all that as part of my own journey and my own journey of awakening. I also became a yoga teacher somewhere in the middle. And so, I still deeply immersed in yoga and yoga practice. And actually now I do predominantly work as a coach and advisor to humans and teams and businesses, but I'm actually weaving the yoga in.
What I'm hearing you say in these answers is that you've been on an incredible journey of self-discovery. And while using your time and taming the chaos, you have discovered huge elements about yourself and about life as well. Talk us through your first wake-up call and what impact that's had on how you've gone on to live the rest of your life.
The first big wake-up call was when I woke up from my first marriage and realized that I had to leave it. Now, I can't make light of that situation. I know there will be listeners that have been probably in these circumstances, and maybe if you are today, I was in a situation of domestic violence in that marriage. It was a codependent relationship. And so when I say I left myself behind, I mean, I really, really did. And I lived a life of what I can only describe as servitude, where I was controlled and manipulated by another person. That feels quite disempowering to say that, but I'm actually even more proud of the fact that I actually left. And a big part of me claiming myself was actually in that moment of leaving, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing what I'd actually even been living in. I didn't even really understand what I'd been living in, and I'd been in that relationship for 12 years. I think it's fair to say that context is important, because I really did just like wake up as if from a nightmare. Like, I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know who I was, or why I was, or what I wanted, or what I liked. I mean, I'd literally lived for another person for 12 years. And I think, whilst I hope your circumstances, maybe listeners, haven't been as extreme as that, what I would say though is that I think for many, certainly women listening, you will know what I mean when I say that we live a life of servitude where we place others' needs ahead of our own, right? Like, there's just a scale of how deeply we do that. This self-abandonment is almost bred in us in the societies that we operate in, that it's like, well, no. Part of me being a good human in the world means serving everybody else. And so my goals were just centered around not myself. So then came the accidental unfolding of what has now become my business today, honestly, right? So, over the next decade, I took myself through what has now become the Bloom Method, which is ultimately a journey of self-claiming, where you start with figuring out who you are and why you are. Then you learn to love and value who that is. Then you learn to bring that out in the environments that you're in. So that means self-advocacy. That means, building up that muscle of communicating with confidence and being able to assert yourself, creating the structure in your life that really serves you, and creating boundaries. And by the way, none of this stuff is fixed, because it's always moving, and your life is always changing, but also the players in your life are always changing, and different people bring out different things in us. So, I say that with all the grace in the world, that we're always figuring it out. We're always figuring this balance out. But once you've built the right toolkit, it gets a lot easier, because then you've got the right foundations, and within your routine what really serves me. And you can keep experimenting and start to view your life and career as an experiment, which I think is so, so important. So yeah, it really has been a journey for me, but one that actually accidentally created the business that I now have today.
Thank you so, so much for sharing. I truly appreciate you being so honest and so vulnerable. And I know that there will be listeners who have benefited from this. And just to reiterate what Ruth said, if you feel like you're in that position, or you've been triggered by anything that Ruth shared, please seek the professional help that you need. And we will leave all the links in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for that. Over the years, time has been many, many different things. You've had time in your relationship, time in your career, time with your business now. How are you allocating your time to become the person that you want to, but also to create and allow the business that you're growing to unfold?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's always a balance. But what I've learned over the years, as someone who is driven in the way that I am, and I think many women in similar professions who end up working in either recruitment or HR, a lot of us can have this lingering feeling of not being enough, which truthfully, plot reveal, drives a lot of the overworking and overdoing and overgiving, right? So sorry if I've just pulled down a curtain for you there, but unfortunately that is it, right? So I kind of accept that I am a woman that's always going to be quite motivated to do stuff, right? It just used to be for other people, right? And now I've learned, okay, how do I apply that energy around creating a life where I really thrive, right? So when you have your own business, like any job, it's very easy to overwork and devote your whole self to trying to. But to anybody that's in that circumstance, whether you're overworking at work or whether you're overworking in your own business, whichever one it is, the truth is anything that you're working on will only get better if you're also giving an appropriate amount of time to your own growth and your own development. And actually, those funny little things that you think you might want to try one day are actually probably the secret ingredients that the universe is putting in your path to help you to become the biggest, most vibrant, most authentic version of yourself. These little questions, I'll give you an example. So today, as I said, I'm a leadership coach. I work with companies and women, and I am also a yoga teacher, but Ayurveda's been tapping me on the shoulder for a while, years. And I'm like, I'm interested in Ayurveda, which, by the way, it's like an ancient Indian system of livingness, right? What I love about Ayurveda is nothing is wrong. The answer for everything is it depends. It depends on who you are. It depends on the season of the year we're in. It depends on the time of life you're in. It depends on the time of day even, right? So it's a very inclusive, flexible system of livingness that really can help people understand how to create balance in their lives. Now, as I'm saying that, you're hearing how relevant that actually is to the work I'm doing today, right? But I could have gone, hey, that's just a rabbit hole. Why am I interested in Ayurveda? Surely I need to focus on getting more clients in my business, right? And of course, so what did I do? I do a course on Ayurveda, and suddenly I'm realizing that I'm starting to, first of all, give myself a new level of understanding of how to really add a new layer of wellness in my life. And then second of all, already I'm like working even with my corporate clients. There's a little bit of it weaving in, and there's a deeper level of understanding, and I'm able to, and the quality that I show up in and the energy that I'm able to give and the wisdom that I'm able to share sets the foundation for how I grow in future. And that was true of me when I was employed as much as when I have my own business. It's so important that you create time for these little anomalies. But it's good to also be aware of when they are just a full-on red herring, right? Could this just be something that's trying to keep me away from the highest and best version of myself? Or is it aligned? And what I would say is if it's been tapping you on the shoulder for a while, like Ayurveda had with me, it's probably aligned.
So what I'm hearing you sharing there is that your own growth and development has been part of the journey. You've qualified as a yoga teacher, you're doing Ayurveda. What other modalities have you explored over the years?
I mean, oh gosh, now, I mean, there's been yoga teacher. There has been probably 5 different flavors of yoga, so quite a lot. I also did do some learning about bar, which helped me learn about the muscle and everything even more. But what I will say, actually, the interesting little thought nugget that just popped in my brain, though, about yoga is that I think if I hadn't have become a yoga teacher, I wouldn't have become a chief people officer. Boom. Because being a yoga teacher left me fully exposed, standing up there, feeling like I didn't belong, trying to teach something that I was relatively new at trying to do. I was, you have to start somewhere with teaching this stuff. And I had no career to fall back on, right? It was literally it was one of the most exposing character building things I ever did. But through that journey, I then built okay, right. So then I pushed myself, I think even more. It was 2 years after I became a yoga teacher, I pushed myself to the executive table. And I went from a talent acquisition director to a VP of people. So I actually took a step up from that role to a much broader role, which is not something that we normally get to do, which is also why it's something I share in Bloom, right? It's like, how do we make these seemingly impossible moves in our career, but actually the energy that we're operating in and who we're learning to live and be, like the VP people role, they were like, we need you, right? Like they picked me for it because of the energy that I was operating in. And like the world can really operate like that. And don't get me wrong, it's not like my life has been all plain sailing since. Like I have had difficult moments in my career. It's not like everything suddenly becomes easy, but the older I get, the more I realize that these things that come our way that to challenge us are often just that shake awake that you need to grow into the next version of yourself, which, plot reveal, is really just the version of yourself that you arrived into this world as. You just forget who they are. And then your journey is just to come back, claw your way back in.
I love this. So qualifying as a yoga teacher was what got you into the energetic state of being able to be seen as the perfect person for that next role.
As the leader. Yeah. Yeah, because and actually, if I think about that really as well, I really struggled. Like that moment of having to stand up, and I was having to learn how to stand and to look more like I knew what I was doing when I didn't. I did enough to teach the class, gang. I wasn't putting anyone at risk, promise. But that was actually where that's where the sass came in, or at least the fake confidence before it became, embodied confidence.
I love that. So talk to us about your yoga teacher training journey. Where did it begin? What did you start with, and where are you at right now?
I started with 50 hours of yoga teacher training in Germany in a style called Budokan. And what I would say that's interesting there, and this is also important for what I've just been saying about your own career journey, is that I never planned on being a teacher. I was just a practitioner who wanted to learn more about it. So I did a 50-hour, knowing that doesn't qualify me to be a teacher. But I went along with other yoga teachers and just threw myself in and did this 50 hours in the middle of Germany. Away we go, right? And then after that, I did my 200 hours in the UK. And then again, I was like, I just want to learn more. And actually, it was someone else who forced me into teaching. But a friend of mine, like a wonderful little guide, because they come along for us too, who was like, cover my class, you will teach, right? So she forced me into teaching. Fun fact, same thing happened with coaching. With coaching, I was like, I'm going to do a coaching qualification to become a better leader. And then lo and behold, the universe conspired. I finished my role and then started, before I was ready, became a coach. So, it was coaching tapped me on the shoulder for years and years and years, just to add that into. And then since then I did aerial yoga because I wanted to learn more about that. I've done multiple, just being a better quality of teacher qualifications that won't make sense to anybody if you're not. But the thing that I'm deepening my practice in right now is something called Kundalini. And Kundalini is an ancient technology in yoga, which is essentially what in Kundalini you would do in a class is it's a bit like a recipe, right? And you do a set number of actions in that class repetitively that cleanse your system, increase your energy, calm your nervous system, bring you into alignment. I mean, there's a whole science bit behind it, but I honestly truly believe through my own practice in my own world that shifting and learning more Kundalini is part of what's really enabling me to operate more fully in my life right now.
It sounds incredible. And looking back, can you join up the dots with any of the qualifications that you've done and then the steps that you've taken? It sounds like you're saying quantum leaping was the direct result of following the breadcrumbs and having faith that there is a bigger plan.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I've probably called out the biggest ones, which were, I think yoga teaching definitely set me up for the executive table. And I still carried on doing a couple of qualifications, even when I was chief people officer. I actually still taught yoga one day a week, and I was still learning and deepening my practice. It was just one class a week, but I was still doing it. And it was actually the pandemic that stopped me. But I think that's quite a good thing, because sometimes things happen for a reason. Well, sometimes, usually things happen for a reason. And I feel like I was being called to go deeper inside in my practice. And then I think the next big thing that I was called into was that coaching qualification. To become a better leader. And then lo and behold, before I knew it, the universe had given me an opportunity to leave the role that I was in, which I gladly embraced. And then before I knew it, companies were starting to come in and ask me to start delivering workshops. And this was actually new for me. I hadn't actually advertised that, right? So I honestly believe it was me shifting myself and following my nose that meant, that those companies started to come my way. And through those companies coming my way, I started to create workshops and learning programs, realized, whoa, hold on a minute. This might be way more in my zone of genius than anything I've done so far. And then lo and behold, carried on that journey. But the funny thing is yes, I'm a leadership coach, and yes, I'm an advisor, and yes, I work with companies and teams on their culture and really creating environments where humans get to thrive. But truthfully, it's all yoga, right? I'm not teaching physical asana all the time like I used to, but what I'm doing is teaching humans how to connect in with ourselves. And when we start to go through this process of living in alignment, figuring out who that is, creating a life that really serves who that is, then that's yoga. I mean, there are eight limbs of yoga, and only one of them is physical asana. The rest is all about how we're living and who we're being and how we're vibrating in the world. Actually, and the word itself, yoga, means union, right? Union with yourself and then union with the world around you. I love that. And I think that if more companies were built around the idea of union and yoga, we'd be doing a lot better than we are right now. But in the meantime, I get to be that person coming in under stealth, building leadership development programs, kind of teaching yoga. And hopefully helping those teams to really create environments where everybody gets to thrive.
Talk to us about intuition, but also weave in the thing that comes up over and over again. I don't have time to do XYZ. And what, in your opinion, is intuition? What's fear? What's procrastination? I'd just love your thoughts around that.
I think if we start with fear, in fact, let's take it back. Let's start with your brain. Your brain is just one organ in your body, but you think it's all of who you are. Your brain is an amazing organ, but its job is to keep you safe and functioning. Now, what the brain learns is some unhealthy ways of doing that. Your brain is actually can be quite silly because what it will choose is something that's really bad for you, but because you know it, it's comfortable, over something that's really good for you, but because it's different, it's uncomfortable because you're going to be trying to do something different, right? So fear is your brain's way of keeping you safe, but safe is not always safe. Now, safe in some cases, like sometimes the brain is good at keeping us safe and it's right to do that, but a lot of the time these days it's not. Which brings me to your intuition, because your intuition, I think, is that deep, wise voice within you that really connects you to the universe. And so for me, I like to think of that little voice as being quite low down in my stomach. When I first became aware of it, it's almost like there's this wise old sage in you that's almost sitting back laughing at all the ridiculousness of your brain bouncing around. And so the more that we can learn to connect into that wise old sage voice, the more we can let it guide us, right? And by the way, procrastination was the other thing, wasn't it? And procrastination is a stress it's a stress response. It's another way that your brain is trying to keep you safe, right? Because it's that same thing of, usually we procrastinate the most over the things that are actually going to take us into bigger versions of ourselves, right? It's like it's easier for us to reply to an email and get validated by someone at work, or do something that we're already good at because we get that nervous system like, oh, you're good, great, you're a good person, you're enough, right? Versus, oh no, I've got to build this presentation. Someone's asked me to do this thing for the first time, so I'm going to avoid it. And then I'm going to avoid the phone call, and I'm not going to they're going to ask me to do something that's bigger. And look, I'm not sitting here above any of this, my friends. Like, we all have this shady brain thing going on, right? Well, not all, but certainly lots of us have our brain working to try to keep us safe in just this way, right? but that what you as the individual, your job is to learn the art of discernment. Is this in this moment good for me, really, in my highest and best self, good? Or is it not good for me, really, in my highest and best self? And that is what creating space gives you the opportunity to do, is practicing this art of discernment, which is where these practices that something in you is telling you to do, and you're like, but it doesn't make sense. I'm a stockbroker. Why would I want to go and learn more about breath work, for example? Well, maybe it's your intuition saying, hey, I'm really tired of running on this treadmill over here, and it's time to connect you into, you've learned what you need to learn in this chapter, and I need to shift you into something else. And maybe you don't end up integrating it into your life in quite the way that I have. Maybe it's just the thing that helps you really align yourself to be clear on, oh, okay, what's my next step? Now, I'm super, super out there with it now. Like, I literally look for signs in the universe. If I see something multiple times, I take that as a sign that I'm probably meant to do it. And I deeply trust it. But when I started out with this stuff, I didn't. I just was like, gradually over time, as I've connected to myself more and more, and I've seen that wise voice is often the right voice, and I've built this case study of myself with it, now I know better. Now I'm like, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, no, brain, we're okay. I know, brain, you're doing a great job and you're trying to keep us safe here, but we're okay. And literally that's the conversation that I have with myself.
I love that. Thank you so much for clarifying and adding all of the flavors to that answer. Talk us through your daily routine. What does it look like these days?
Yeah, I'm very happy to, but with one caveat. That is Ayurveda. Remember, your routine, your life, your livingness, the answer for you as a being is it depends. It depends on you, right? So what works for me works for the being that I am, in the stage of life that I'm in the situation, right? So I just have to give that caveat, because this isn't a rule book for you to follow, right? The only thing you got to do is figure out who you are and what works for you. For me, I am based in America at the moment, but a lot of my clients are in England, so that means my days, my routine is, I go to bed at 8:30 and I wake up at 4:30, and I say that to be really clear that I work hard to try to get plenty of sleep, and I've had to work hard at sleep to get good at sleep. So some days it works out, some days it doesn't. I try my best. And then when I wake up, I greet myself in the mirror and I say good morning to myself, and I ask what I need. Then Ayurveda again, tongue scrape. That's a thing in Ayurveda. We scrape our tongues, get rid of all the toxins that have accumulated through the night. I won't go into this much detail of everything, gang. I'm just saying that because you might want to try it, right? Then I get ready, get on my mat. But what I do before I get into any practice is I ground myself. Now, for me, I burn some incense or some Palo Santo, depending on where I'm at. I light a candle and I try to connect into all of the elements, which is quite an Ayurvedic thing too. So I remind myself of the elements of earth, of water, of space or ether, of air, and of fire. And I remind myself of all those things because we're all made up of all of them, right? So and sometimes we are too high in one and not high enough in another. So really embodying them for me is about, just reminding myself of who I am, right? It's just part of it. And then I begin a very connected practice, which every day, typically I do some Kundalini, which is breath work, meditation. But then I either do more the yoga that we see in the West, which is the sort of physical asana, vinyasa, or I do bar. Those are my what sits of choice. And normally I'm wrapping that up by about 6 a.m. And then I get ready, and then I may start calls at 7 a.m. for me. But on the get ready front, I dress for my very best self. So whatever my soul wants to wear that day, I wear it. I'm like, how does Ruth want her hair today? How does she want her? What energy does she want to be in today? What earrings does she want? Right? Like, It doesn't matter if I'm just staying at home all day and not going to work. I literally dress for my soul every day. It's one of the things my outgoing husband actually used to compliment me on. He's like, you really do that. Like, it's quite inspiring. Like, you literally are like, who do I want to, like, it's right. And then I start my day depending on when that is. It could be 7, it could be 8, depending on when the calls start. And then, but the wind down routine is quite important too. For me, winding down, I have to make sure that I am starting the journey towards bed from about 6:30, just spiritually. It's like, okay, right, we're going to leave the day behind. We're not going to we're going to try and put down everything we need to put down to be able to sleep. And so for me, it doesn't mean I never watch anything, right? It doesn't mean I never look at my phone, but it does mean that from about 8 p.m., I'm trying not to be embroiled in anything else out there. And then every evening I do my daily retro, which is something that we teach and do in Bloom, which is a daily diary, which asks really, how have I been? So right now the questions can change depending on where you're at and what you're trying to keep yourself honest about. So for me right now, it's how's my body felt today? How have I been in myself? Is there anything I need to note there? Where have I held back? Where did I not have boundaries or something like that? And then what are my learnings? And in my learnings, I also, if I've read something interesting that day, I try to integrate my learning in that moment by taking the notes that I've written earlier and sort of writing them out. And so that this stuff just doesn't fly away from us in the way that it so often does when we're listening to things. And and I miss that in my morning routine. I'll often listen to some sort of book, audible book really, or something like that. Sometimes I go out for a walk in the middle of the day. It depends on which city I'm in and what I'm doing. Right now I do. And sometimes I go and do other classes with the sole purpose of being amongst other humans, not because I necessarily need them. But usually there's some other, even if I don't necessarily need another Kundalini class, going to the class means that I get to learn from other people and be in different energy. And I think that's quite important. So I do that too. And my morning routine will depend on what I've got coming. Anyway, that's probably way too long of an answer, but that's how my life works right now.
Thank you so much for sharing such a great answer. And as we're wrapping up this episode today, we'll leave all the links to you in the show notes, obviously. But where is the best place for us to find you in the online world?
Yeah, so I am at Ruth Penfold on Instagram, Ruth Penfold on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best places. My website is ourtimetobloom.com. And if you want to get started with figuring out who you are, you can literally go to ourtimetobloom.com/values, get my values worksheet. And that honestly was the beginning of me really figuring out who I am. So it's the foundation of the Bloom method that I teach today.
And Ruth Penfold, thank you so much for your time today. There's so many more questions we didn't have time to go into. So I feel like we need to call this a part 1 and have you back for part 2. So if you've got any questions that have come up during this podcast episode with Ruth, then please let us know. And we would love to ask them of her when she comes back on again.
I'd love that. Please. Yeah, that would be great.
Ruth Penfold, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. This podcast is amazing and I'm thrilled to be a part of it.
And until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay well, and remember, it's your time. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you loved what you heard, be sure to let me know by leaving a review so I can keep the good stuff coming. Come and say hi on Instagram at Success by Design Training, or visit my website, successbydesigntraining.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search Abigail Barnes. Until next time, don't forget, you are amazing and it's your time.